Ancient Indian civilization is one of the most interesting and important civilizations of the world. India's educational and cultural tradition is the most ancient in the world's history. All that India is today is the gift of its cultural and social heritage of the last 5000 years, as we can see from the following video. If we have to understand it properly, we must study its system of education, which was preserved, propagated, and modified during this period. The Vedas occupies the first place among the ancient texts which provide knowledge about ancient Indian education and society. The Vedic period was the beginning of Indian culture, literature, and science. After the Vedic period, the social system influenced the education system. It is in the social religious system that we see most of the extremities and formalities followed in Vedic and post-Vedic period. Ritualism had increased and people were profoundly troubled. Buddhism can be essentially seen as a product of these circumstances. We will learn about the educational system that prevailed in the Buddhist period. Though the medieval period of India was filled with political and military disturbances and upheavals, a system of education did evolve mainly for the propagation of Islamic religion. This is called Islamic education. The Muslim rulers in India generally took a keen interest in education. Both the system of education enriched human life considerably by providing moral education and discipline. The Buddhist education laid a strong foundation for a harmonious cultural, political, and economic relation with other ancient countries. Buddhism held that the worldly life was full of sorrow and that salvation could be possible only by renouncing it. Spread of Buddhist philosophy, principles, and teachings to lead the people from miseries of life to eternal happiness was the main aim of Buddhist education. Additionally, some of the other aims were formation of highest order character and discipline, provide equal opportunity for all the people irrespective of class and caste, provide secular education to masses, provide education to women, preservation and transmission of essential culture, pursuit of freedom from earthly desires. The Buddhist education was spiritual in essence and was thoroughly packed with religion. However, it did not ignore the occupational and technical aspects of life. Subjects like literature, philosophy, arts, commerce, agriculture, and the methods of warfare were taught in the educational centers. Other vocational subjects included in the curriculum were spinning, weaving, printing of cloth, tailoring, writing, accountancy, painting and sketching, Sanskrit literature, astronomy cum astrology, medicine and works of law, polity and administration, Ayurveda, surgery and coinage arts and crafts, architecture were also taught to the students. Education was categorized into two stages. Primary education aimed at reading and writing arithmetic. Higher education comprised teaching in religion, philosophy, medicine and military science. The art of writing had significantly advanced in the Buddhist period. However, it had not reached the masses and it was not practical use. Similar to Vedic age, the method of Buddhist education was mainly oral. Discussions and argumentation on different religious and philosophical subjects were daily held in monasteries. Students were trained in the art of debating from the beginning of their academic career. The students used to go on a journey at the end of career in order to give a realistic and practical shape to what they had learned in the monastic schools. Reasoning and analysis formed an important part in the method of teaching in the higher education. The method used in teaching of technical subject was both theoretical and practical. In addition to Sanskrit, use of vernacular language, especially Pali, was used as a language of instruction. During the initial stage of Buddhist education, much encouragement was given to women education and separate monastic schools were established for this purpose. The education provided to women helped to raise the standard of women's character and intellect and produce learned women of high caliber who guided the society in the fields of religion and philosophy. Women religious missionaries used to go to foreign countries in order to spread the Buddhist religion. Highly educated women undertook teaching work and were known as Upadhyaya. Women were given education in politics, administrative techniques, criticism, Vedanta, Ayurveda, and literature of higher order. The beginning of 8th century AD marked the event of Mohammedan invention in India. The history of Islamic education has been the history of system of government and social system extending over 700 years. Though this middle period is filled with political and military disturbances and upheavals, a system of education did evolve mainly for the propagation of Islamic religion. According to definition of Thomas More, education is an education, the art of educating or bringing out what is latent in a person. In its early forms, the word was used of basic physical nurturing, bringing out the undeveloped powers of the physical body and could even be applied to animals. In its deepest form, education is the art of enticing the soul to emerge from its cocoon, from its coil of potentiality and cave of hiding. Education is not the piling on of learning information, data, facts, skills, or abilities, that's training or instructing, but is rather making visible what is hidden as a seed. The purpose of education is to gain the knowledge and skills necessary to make informed and reasonable decisions. Any other consequences should be treated as a merely incidental. Islam gives importance to education, which is the process of teaching and acquiring or learning knowledge, which includes beliefs, values, attitudes, manners, and skills. Education in Islam plays important role in developing every individual to be successful in realizing the very purpose of man's creation. Islam attaches such great importance to knowledge and education. When the Quran began to reveal, the first word of its first verse was Ikra, that is, read. Education is thus the starting point of every human activity. A scholar alim is accorded great respect in the Hadith. According to a Hadith, the ink of pen of a scholar is more precious than a blood of martyr, because a scholar builds individuals and nations along positive lines. In this way, he bestows real life to the world. On the one hand, Islam places a great emphasis on learning. On the other, all those factors which are necessary to make progress in learning are provided by God. One of these special factors is the freedom of research. Islam gives us complete manifesto of spending our lives. This is not only spiritual and ethical values we learn from Islam, but it also teaches the right ways of managing family issues, doing business, implementing laws, and even running the governments with taking active part in international political atmosphere. If we analyze the problem of so-called civilized nations in today's world, we will find them searching peace of mind and any good system which could control their day-by-day collapsing family life and social values. This is only Islam which has the complete solution of human mental, physical, and social needs. These facts prove that modern education systems and the involved learning material are not fulfilling the demands of mankind today, and it's an immediate need of deploying the correct Islamic teachings into the world of education. The meaning of education and of what it involves is of utmost importance in the formulation of a system of education and its implementation. Supposing I am asked, what is education? And I answer, Education is a process of instilling something into human beings. In this answer, a process of instilling refers to the method and the system by which what is called education is gradually imparted. Something refers to the content of what it is instilled, and human beings refer to the recipient of both the process and the content. Now, the answer given above already encompasses three fundamental elements that constitute education: the process, the content, the recipient, but it is not yet a definition because those elements are deliberately left vague. Furthermore, the way of formulating the sentence meant to be developed into a definition was given above gives the impression that what is involved is the process. Supposing I reformulate the answer: education is something progressively instilled into a man. We still encompass the three fundamental elements inherent in education, but the order of precedence as to the important element that constitutes education, and now the content and not the process. During the Muslim period, education received a great patronage of state. The Muslim rulers established many maktabs, madrasas, libraries, etc., and patronized many scholars. They also granted scholarships to many students. Arab and Central Asian peoples brought Muslim educational models to the subcontinent in both the medieval and early modern periods. Within decades of Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE, Arab mariners began to trade, reside, and intermarry with local women in South India. Turkic peoples and other Central Asians raided northern India around 1000 CE and thereafter established several foreign conquest empires. Muslim rulers promoted urban education by endowing libraries and literary societies. They also founded primary schools, maktabs, in which students learned reading, writing, and basic Islamic prayers, and secondary schools, madrasas, to teach advanced language skills, Quranic exegesis, prophetic traditions, Islamic law, Sharia, and related subjects. Often attached to mosques, the Islamic schools were open to poor but were gender segregated, often only for boys. Muslim girls of affluent families studied at home if they received any education beyond learning to recite the Quran. From the beginning of the Mughal Empire in India in 1526 until the end of Mughal political presence in 1848, Persian was the court language, and the elite boys could attend Persian schools to learn literature, history, ethics, law, administration, and court protocol. Subjects such as medicine, mathematics, and logic also formed an important part of the curriculum in centers of Islamic learning. More intimate settings for the spread of ideas were the retreats, Khanqa, of famous Sufis, Muslims who professed mystic doctrines. These new education models did not necessarily displace the older ones, although state patronage patterns shifted. Sanskrit academies continued to teach young male Brahmanas literature and law. Apprenticeship and commercial schools were taught boys the skills needed for business. Education for girls was the exception rather than a rule. India witnessed a large number of Mohammedan inventions in the beginning of 8th century AD. Muhammad of Ghazni invaded India and established a large number of schools and libraries in his own country by the looted wealth. Later on, when the Muslim rulers established permanent empire in India, they introduced a new system of education. Consequently, the ancient system of education was greatly changed. In fact, the education during the Muslim period was much inferior to that of Hindu period. No Muslim ruler except Akbar did commendable works in the field of education. Let us now briefly discuss the different aspects of education during the Muslim period. The foremost aim of education during the Muslim period was the extension of knowledge and the propagation of Islam. During this period, education was imparted for the propagation of Islamic principles, laws, and social conventions. Education was based on religion and its aim was to make persons religious minded. It further aimed at the achievement of material prosperity. During the Muslim period, education was organized in maktabs and madrasas. Primary education was given in maktabs and higher education was given in madrasas. In maktabs, children were made to remember the tenets of Quran. Reading, writing, and primary arithmetic were imparted to them. Besides, they were given the education of Arabic script, Persian language, and script. The stories of prophets and Muslim fakir were also told to the children. Children were also imparted the knowledge of art of writing and conversation. The system of oral education was mostly prevalent in those days. The children were sent to madrasas after completing the primary education. There were separate teachers for different subjects. Special emphasis was given to the education of Islam. Religious and secular subjects also taught in madrasas. The religious education included the study of Quran, Muhammad and his conventions, Islamic laws and Islamic history, etc. The secular education included the study of Arabic literature, grammar, history, philosophy, mathematics, geography, politics, economics, Greek language and agriculture, etc. Many cities played a prominent part in imparting higher education during the Muslim period in India. Delhi. Early Muslim rulers made Delhi their capital. Mughal queens also did not leave any stone unturned to add to the glory and beauty of metropolis of India. It was quite natural for Delhi, for this reason, to become a center of Muslim education. It was Nazaruddin who established Madrasa-e-Nasiriya in Delhi under the chairmanship of Shiraz. Other rulers of Salve dynasty also maintained Delhi as an important seat of Muslim education. Alauddin Khilji established many madrasas in Delhi and appointed renowned teachers therein. These institutions had more than 40 learned Muslim theologians and teachers of Muslim law. During the days of Alauddin Khilji, Delhi had become a center of literatures and artists. During the reign of Muhammad Tughlaq and his successor Firoz Tughlaq, Delhi continued to enjoy the status of important seat of Muslim education. During the reign of Mughals, Delhi not only maintained its original status but also improved it. It now became the most important seat of Muslim education in northern India. Humayun had established the institution for the study of astronomy and geography in Delhi. Akbar added certain institutions to it where Arabic, Persian, grammar, philosophy and astronomy were also taught. It is said that even Akbar's ayah had established a big institution in Delhi in 1561 and the famous scholar Badayuni had received education in this very institution. Jahangir and Shah Jahan also maintained the status of Delhi and contributed to its importance in whatever way they could. Aurangzeb tried to transform Delhi into a city of orthodox Muslim education. With this point in view, he established many new educational institutions and gave financial aid to the existing one. After him, the decline of importance of Delhi started. It was Sikandar Lodi who made Agra an important center of Muslim education. He had established many maktabs and madrasas in this city, where students of foreign countries also came to study. In this word of Mr. Jafar, in course of time, a splendid city sprang at the selected site and took the name of Agra, which played prominent part in shaping the destinies of India and our future history. After Sikandar Lodi, Babur and Humayun also established certain madrasas in Agra. However, it was Akbar who made Agra not only a center of learning and education but also a seat of culture, craft and finance. During his reign, Agra had become a huge university where scholars and learned men came from far and wide. Mr. Jafar, in his book entitled Muslim Education in India, has described this situation very nicely. Men of learning and erudition from Arabia, Persia, and Bukhara poured into ever increasing number at the prospect of receiving better patronage from the rulers of India, who were remarkable for their money finance. The result was that in course of time, Agra grew into a great literary city containing several schools and colleges where people flocked from far and wide for higher education. Near Agra, there is the famous city of Fatehpur Sikri where Akbar had built many schools. After his death, Jahangir and Shah Jahan added certain madrasas and educational institutions to the existing ones and also gave financial aid to them. During the reign of Aurangzeb, Agra had assumed an important place as a seat of Islamic education, but with downfall of Mughal Empire, Agra also declines in its reputation. In order to fully appreciate and understand the education system, it is good to have an insight into the influences and decisions that have taken place in past to form and develop the education system. This section will highlight the evolvement of education across the different parts of the world. When the Tokugawa period 1600 to 1867 began, a few common people in Japan could read or write. However, by the period's end, Tokugawa education left a valuable legacy, an increasingly literate population, a meritocratic ideology, and an emphasis on discipline and competent performance. After 1868, the Meiji leaders established a public education system to help Japan catch up with the West and form a modern nation. Teaching techniques included reading from various textbooks, memorizing abacus, and repeatedly copying Chinese characters and Japanese script. Modern systems of education in Europe derives their origins from the schools of High Middle Ages. The most schools during this era were founded upon the religious principles with the primary purpose of training the clergy. Free education for the poor was officially mandated by the Church in 1179. Parishes and monasteries also established free schools teaching at least basic literary skills. Private independent schools reappeared in medieval Europe during this time, but they too were religious in nature and mission. In Central Europe, scientist and educator John Amos Comenius propagated a reform system of universal education that was widely used in Europe. The growth resulted in increased government interest in education. In the late 19th century, most of the West, Central, and parts of East Europe began to provide elementary education in reading, writing, and arithmetic, partly because politicians believed that education was needed for orderly political behavior. In the 20th century, new directions in education included in Italy, Maria's Montessori School, and in Germany, Rudolf Steiner's development of Waldorf education. In Imperial Russia, literate people made up 28.4% of the population. During the Eighth Party Congress of 1919, the Soviet government proclaimed creation of the new socialist system of education as the major aim, and abolition of illiteracy became the primary task. By 1937, according to census data, the literacy rate was 86% for men and 65% for women, making a total literacy rate of 75%. A huge network of so-called national schools was established by the 1930s, and this network continued to grow in enrollments throughout the Soviet era. The history of education in United States, or Foundation of Education, covers the trends in educational philosophy, policy, institutions, as well as formal and informal learning in America from the 17th century to today. The progressive era in education in North America was a part of larger progressive movement and extended from 1890s to the 1930s. The era was notable for an intense expansion in the number of schools and students served, especially in the fast-growing metropolitan cities. After 1910, smaller cities began building high schools. By 1940, 50% of young adults had earned a high school diploma. In 1983, the National Commission on Excellence in Education released a report titled A Nation at Risk. Consequently, conservatives called for an increase in academic rigor, including an increase in the number of school days per year, longer school days, and higher testing standards. India's educational and cultural tradition is the most ancient in world's history. Attainment of knowledge was regarded as a sacred duty. The literature and culture of ancient India was mostly the means of preaching religion, but it did not altogether neglect the worldly affairs. However, the ultimate aim of education in the ancient India was to attain mukti, salvation. Thank you.